Hey guys, tonight we time travel back to a Japan before electric toothbrushes, before minty gel toothpaste, and long before your dentist guilt-tripped you about not flossing enough. Welcome to Edo, where the air smells faintly of incense and grilled eel, and your morning breath isn't a private matter. It's a public concern. You're waking up in a wooden townhouse in a bustling merchant district of Edo, now known as Tokyo. The tatami beneath your futon is slightly scratchy. The shoji screens filter the morning sun, and somewhere nearby, someone is already chopping vegetables for breakfast. But before you can enjoy your miso soup and pickled radish, you've got a problem. Your mouth feels like a rice paper lantern that's been stored too long in a fish market. You reach instinctively for toothpaste, only to find nothing of the that sort. There's no sink, no mirror, and certainly no minty tube with cartoon bears promising extra fluoride protection. Welcome to the world before modern oral hygiene. You probably won't survive this, at least not with all your molars. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're tuning in from tonight. What city? What time? So we can build a sleepy little map of the world together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You groggily shuffle to the basin. It's a lacquered bowl filled with water that's already been used by your siblings and possibly your great aunt. Cleanliness is important in Edo, but the definitions are flexible. There's a ladle, a towel, and next to them, a small jar of white cloudy liquid. Rice water. Not just any rice water. This is toyu, the starchy leftover rinse from washing short-grain rice. It's sticky, slightly sour, but in this time, it's believed to be both cleansing and slightly antiseptic. Your mother insists it tightens the gums and freshens the spirit. Historians still argue whether that's because it actually worked or because there weren't better options. You slosh it in your mouth. It's like gargling with warm glue. You try not to gag. Down the street, a neighbor is doing the same thing. The gentle chorus of morning rinses begins, sloshing, spitting, sighing. There's something oddly comforting about it, like brushing, teeth in chorus, except mushier. You're not alone in this rice water ritual. It was common throughout Edo period households, particularly in urban areas where public image and cleanliness were more closely tied to status. If your breath was bad, people would notice, and they would comment. Of course, rinsing isn't the only option. If you're lucky enough to have access to leftover charcoal from last night's hearth, you might chew a tiny twig, ash-dusted, shaped like a mini brush. It's not in your hand yet, but soon. First, you dry your face with a cloth that's seen better centuries. The air smells of sandalwood. Someone nearby is heating water. Somewhere else, a rooster is late to his job. You, meanwhile, are preparing to make your mouth less offensive to your neighbors and your boss, a rice merchant who believes bad breath is an insult to the gods of commerce. The pressure is real. You glance at a polished mirror, actually just burnished bronze. Your reflection looks like an ink painting made by a drunk poet. But it's enough to spot last night's fishbone stuck between your teeth. You make a mental note. Time to find the toothpick box. Before you go, you look around. Your modest home. Walls of wood and paper. A shelf with a few books and a family altar. And by the door, a pair of straw sandals waiting to be stepped into. The city awaits. Its rhythms, its smells, and its surprisingly obsessive oral care customs. Today, you'll meet herbalists hawking mouth cures, see lovers exchange scented toothpicks, and maybe, just maybe, get invited to a blackening ceremony. But right now, you've got rice breath and a long day ahead. The chewy tang of fermented starch still lingers on your tongue as you step out into the morning bustle of Edo. The city is alive in a quietly crowded way. Wooden sandals clack along gravel streets. Merchants unroll shutters, and smoke from breakfast fires weaves through the air. You're on a mission, though. Time to find something that actually scrubs. You duck into a small apothecary just off the main thoroughfare. It's dark and herbal scented, stacked high with tiny wooden drawers labeled in elegant brush script. A wiry man behind the counter barely glances up from his pestle work. You whisper your need. He smirks. Without a word, he reaches into one of the lower drawers and plucks out a small bundle wrapped in rice paper. Inside, a bundle of twigs, roughly finger length, each charred slightly at one end. Willow and oak, he says. Charcoal. Cleans. Also keeps demons out of your molars. You nod solemnly. You've heard this before. It's less about science and more about vibes and maybe fiber. These twigs are known as haboki, or toothbrushes, but they're nothing like the nylon army in your modern bathroom. Some were soft enough to fray like bristles, others required you to chew them into submission. You take one and bite. It cracks slightly, and the inner fibers split just enough to scrape. The taste is dusty, a bit bitter, but not unpleasant, especially after that rice water situation. Historians still argue whether charcoal twigs actually cleaned teeth or merely redistributed plaque. But in Edo, that argument is irrelevant because everyone agrees on one thing: chewing is better than nothing. As you wander through the narrow lanes, you see others doing the same. An elderly woman absent-mindedly gnaws at a twig while tending her pickled daikon. A scholar chews between strokes of his ink brush. Even a samurai, off-duty and leaning on a post, gnaws thoughtfully at a stick while watching a dog chase its own tail. The streets themselves seem to hum with quiet dental commitment. Of course, the charcoal twig isn't just utilitarian, it's got flair. Some are dipped in clove oil for a spicy kick. Others come wrapped in woven string, a kind of primitive dental grip. Kids chew the ends into paintbrushes and then pretend to be famous poets. You once saw a boy try to brush his teeth and write calligraphy with the same twig. The poem was terrible, but his teeth gleamed. There's even a whole etiquette to it. You're not supposed to spit visibly in public, so people chew, rinse quietly with water from a sleeve-hidden bottle, then subtly swallow or blot. To modern eyes, it looks like everyone is constantly tasting something imaginary or suffering, from very polite nausea. You pass a stall where a woman sells small packets of powdered burnt eggplant skin. For whitening, she insists. Royal concubines used it. The packet is tied with red string and smells like disappointment. You buy one anyway. It'll be fun to try it tonight when no one is looking, as you round the corner into a busier Market Street. The sounds of Edo swell around you. Wooden wheels, hawkers, flute music, the distant thump of rice being pounded into mochi. And somewhere nearby, someone's breath is probably ruining the vibe. But not yours. Not today. Your charcoal-crunched, rice-water-rinsed mouth is practically a floral arrangement by comparison. You feel slightly smug. Still, there's a lingering question in your mind. If everyone's chewing and rinsing and spitting so diligently, why, do you keep seeing toothless grannies? What happened to all those teeth? Turns out, tooth loss was common. Despite all the chewing and scrubbing, sugar was starting to creep into diets. Thank you, imported sweets and black market candies. Plus, twigs can't reach into tight molar crevices, and rice rinse isn't a miracle elixir. Oral care in Edo is enthusiastic but not always effective. Still, the effort counts. There's a certain gentle dignity to the way people tend to their mouths. It's not vanity, it's self-respect. A clean mouth is a calm mind, or so they say. By midday, you've chewed through one twig, blackened the corners of your lips with charcoal, and been offered a second stick by a flirtatious fishmonger. You accept. It tastes faintly of smoked mackerel, romantic, in a very niche way. You pause beneath a cherry tree just beginning to bud. The breeze is soft. The city breathes around you. And as you nibble your second toothbrush of the day, you realize something odd. Your mouth feels clean. Not minty, not modern, but clean, which is more than most people get in any century. You head toward the waterfront where the air smells like seaweed, damp wood, and roasted chestnuts. Along the canal, barge workers unload crates of dried fish, while children weave between them, carrying errand baskets and giggling like wind chimes. You're not here for fish today. You're on the hunt for grit. Literally. You find a street vendor with a spread of oddities: oyster shells, ground coral, polished stones in little bowls, and a stack of clean linen cloths. You recognize the setup. This is the abrasive stall. Good for teeth. The vendor nods, pushing a small dish toward you. It's filled with white-gray powder. Sand. From Enoshima. Very blessed. You dip a damp finger into the sand and rub it gently across your teeth. It's like trying to polish porcelain with cat litter. Effective? Possibly. Comfortable? Not in the least. And yet, this was surprisingly common in the Edo period. People would blend crushed oyster shell, fine sea sand, even tiny bits of pottery, or bone ash into powders, sometimes mixed with salt, sometimes just raw. The theory: friction equals cleanliness. Historians still argue whether these methods did more harm than good. Some say the abrasives polished enamel. Others say they eroded it like tiny jackhammers. Either way, your teeth feel like they've been through a tiny exfoliating spa session. Your gums, however, are quietly weeping. You thank the vendor and move on, your tongue dragging cautiously over freshly scrubbed molars. Not everyone went the gritty route, of course. Many swore by salt alone. A few grains pressed into the gums and massaged slowly. It stung, but stinging was considered a sign of efficacy. Pain, cleansing, a logic still used by modern skincare influencers and overly enthusiastic gym instructors. You remember a neighbor, an elderly woman with the cleanest teeth you've ever seen. She would swish salt water every morning, then hum a Buddhist chant for exactly 108 heartbeats. When asked about it, she'd say, "The salt cleans the teeth, the chant cleans the heart." You tried it once and nearly coughed your lungs out. But she lived to 94 with a full set of incisors. So who's laughing now? Salt had another bonus. It was cheap, readily available, and you could flavor it. Add a little citrus peel, maybe dried kelp. Once someone tried cinnamon bark powder, but it made their tongue swell and gave them prophetic dreams about flying carp. They wrote a poem about it. It sold okay. You pause at a tea house for a mid-morning break. The server gives you hot sencha and a small, chewy rice sweet. It sticks slightly to your teeth, so you reach for a pocket packet of powdered coral. Just a pinch on the tongue. Salty, mineral, weirdly floral. You're getting used to this. A nearby patron watches you with interest. He's got blackened teeth and a knowing smirk. He leans over and whispers, "Try river sand next time. Smoother. Fewer barnacle bits." You nod politely and wonder how many barnacles you've just ingested. Still, there's something almost meditative about it all. The rituals, the textures, the odd, slightly painful pleasure of sanding your own teeth until they feel less like rice crackers and more like river stones. You walk back onto the main road, eyes squinting in the midday light. You pass a cloth merchant, a puppet theater, a temple entrance. At each place, someone is quietly tending to their mouth. A quick rinse here, a tiny bag of salt there. Tooth care in Edo isn't a once-a-day thing. It's a way of life. By now, your mouth feels polished, scorched, and slightly oceanic. You're not sure if you've cleaned your teeth or turned them into tiny sand gardens. Either way, you feel part of something ancient and odd and oddly comforting. And just as you're about to head home, you spot a young woman carefully applying something to her teeth. It's black, shiny, almost lacquered. You stare. She smiles, and suddenly, a whole new dental custom opens before you. You pause mid-step, blinking at the glistening black smile offered in your direction. It's not a stain, not a smudge of ink from some accidental poetry accident. No, her teeth gleam like polished obsidian, and she seems proud of it. Welcome to the beguiling, slightly metallic world of ohaguro, the art of tooth blackening. You might instinctively recoil. After all, we've spent entire lifetimes in the modern world scrubbing, whitening, and photoshopping teeth into brighter shades of LED light. But here, in Edo, blackened teeth mean elegance, refinement, adulthood. That woman's smile? It's not a dental disaster, it's a beauty statement. You follow her discreetly through the crowd, half stalking like a curious raccoon. She turns into a narrow alley lined with lanterns and tiny doors, disappearing into what looks like a tea house. Outside, a hanging sign reads, Ohaguro Studio, though not in English, obviously. Your stomach flutters with curiosity. Or maybe it's the coral powder. Inside, the air smells sharp, like vinegar and old coins. A woman in a layered kimono greets you with a bow. She gestures toward a lacquered stool. You sit, nervously. The process begins. She opens a small wooden box and removes a tiny dish filled with black liquid. It looks like soy sauce, but denser, somehow. She dabs a brush made of horsehair into it, then gently swipes it across your teeth. It tastes metallic, slightly vinegary, and deeply unsettling. This concoction, she tells you, is called kanemizu, a mixture of iron filings soaked in tea or sake with vinegar. The iron oxidizes, turning the liquid black. It's reapplied daily, and over time, the stain becomes permanent. Historians still argue whether ohaguro originated purely as a fashion statement or if it had medicinal roots. Some believe it helped preserve teeth by sealing small cracks. Others think it was just to make married women less attractive to wandering samurai. The truth, as always, is somewhere in the gap between enamel and ambition. The woman applying it hums softly. Her brush is steady. The sensation is intimate, slightly strange. You wonder if this is what it feels like to become a calligraphy scroll. In Edo society, ohaguro was associated with maturity, particularly for married women and high-ranking courtesans. Blackened teeth signaled that you were no longer a child, no longer chasing suitors. In court circles, it was seen as noble. In some rural areas, it persisted well into the 19th century. Men sometimes did it too, especially aristocrats and priests. But for most guys, it was a rare treat, or a required ceremony, or an act of rebellion. Depends on the decade, the region, and how much sake was involved. The lady finishes your application with a small smile and a rinse of salt water. She hands you a mirror. You look and gasp. You look bold, like someone who knows the secrets of the moon, or someone who accidentally chewed on an ink stick. It's hard to say. But in this moment, you feel like part of something, a centuries-old beauty ritual, a secret club of shadowed smiles. As you step back into the daylight, the effect is striking. Strangers glance your way. Some nod with approval. Others smirk knowingly. One merchant offers you a discount on rice. Apparently, ohaguro people get perks, but not everyone admires it. Some Edo citizens think it's passé. Others claim it scares children. You pass a group of teenagers gossiping in whispers, one daring, the others to try it before their coming-of-age ceremonies. One of them swears his cousin drank the iron mix and turned into a shrine statue. You keep walking, tasting the tang of iron on your breath. You wonder how long it will last. The color, the meaning, the trend, probably until someone invents mint gum. Still, as you catch your reflection in a vendor's teapot, there's something dignified about the way your teeth gleam like ink. Something restful, like you've written your smile in an ancient script. And now you're ready for whatever else Edo's strange and beautiful hygiene culture has in store. The iron tang still clings to your tongue as you drift away from the ohaguro parlor, feeling a little more mysterious and a lot more metallic than you did an hour ago. As you weave through the early afternoon crowd, a quiet buzz hums through. The air, a temple bell in the distance, the gentle flap of fabric signs, and somewhere close by, chanting. You follow the sound, as if drawn by the invisible string of incense smoke, until you reach a serene temple tucked just off a quiet street. The stone steps are warm from the sun, and an old man sweeps leaves into a perfect little pile. He looks up, sees your blackened teeth, and gives a sage nod. You nod back. No words are needed. You're officially in the club now. Inside, the temple is cool, calm, and scented like cedar and centuries. And here's the twist. Temples in Edo aren't just places to pray or drop coins for a lucky fortune. They're also hubs of health, education, and, yes, oral care. You kneel near a basin, watching as a young monk demonstrates a gentle rinse technique to a group of school children. He dips a ladle, pours water into a cupped palm, and sloshes it back with the poise of a sommelier tasting temple sake. Then he spits discreetly into a bed of moss. The kids imitate him. One giggles. Another nearly swallows the whole ladle. Typical. You're invited to try. It's a blend of tea infused, water and salt, just a hint of dried persimmon leaf for flavor. Slightly bitter, oddly grounding. It's meant to purify the mouth, yes, but also calm the spirit. The monk explains that clean breath equals clear intentions, or at least fewer complaints during meditation. Historians still argue whether dental rituals were primarily spiritual, hygienic, or simply good public health disguised as religion. Either way, it works. You feel calmer already. And your breath? Fresh as a freshly inked sutra. After the rinse, the children are handed tiny pouches of crushed herbal root to chew. You catch a whiff of licorice, mugwort, and clove. One particularly dramatic child pretends he's a samurai being poisoned. The monk rolls his eyes gently. You chew yours slowly. It's chewy, earthy, with a faint numbing quality. Not entirely unpleasant. In fact, some temples even sold their own special blends, part breath freshener, part mild sedative, perfect for long chants or awkward dinner parties. You linger at the incense burner a little longer, inhaling deeply. This place is quiet in a way the city never is. Slow, sacred, and deeply invested in everyone's oral wellness. As you leave, the head monk bows to you and places a small amulet in your palm. For strong teeth, he says. It's shaped like a tiny molar carved from peach wood strung on a thread. You thank him, tie it to your belt cord, and step back into the sun. Now with your blackened teeth, monk-blessed mouth, and herb-chewed tongue, you're starting to feel like an Edo dental champion. Not bad for someone who started the day with rice rinse and existential dread. Still you wonder, do the samurai have their own tooth routines? Surely warriors with sharp swords need sharp molars, right? You take a shortcut through a row of training yards, hoping to find out. The clang of wooden swords draws you closer. Somewhere between the scent of sweat, pine dust, and distant sake steamers, you find a dojo, a training ground where samurai young and old are practicing kata, the choreographed movements that look equal parts dance and death rehearsal. You slip off your sandals and step into the shaded entry. A young samurai with a top knot nods at your ohaguro smile, eyebrows lifting in amused respect. "Polished today, huh?" he quips. "Braver than some of us." You bow back. You're here for knowledge, not combat. It turns out, for all their focus on swordplay and honor, samurai were rather particular about oral hygiene. A strong mouth meant strength of spirit, and more practically, the ability to give orders, recite poetry, and negotiate without knocking your opponents out with pungent breath. One middle-aged instructor, his kimono loosened slightly from the heat, tells you his secret. Soft twigs, pear wood, soaked in sake overnight, rub, rinse, repeat. He offers you one, already chewed into a feathery brush at the tip. It's damp, slightly sweet, and smells faintly of yesterday's celebration. You copy him gently brushing along the gum line. It's soothing, rhythmic, and oddly grounding. like you're polishing both body and bushido. Some samurai even commissioned custom toothpicks known as kujirabo. Carved from whalebone, these were engraved with clan symbols, often worn, tucked into their belts or sleeves. One younger swordsman shows off his carved tooth cleaner with pride. "A gift from my father. He said it was sharper than my wit." You nod respectfully and try not to imagine flossing with something carved from a sea beast's jaw. Historians still debate just how widespread these practices were. Some claim only upper-ranking samurai cared about dental routines, while others argue even rural warriors followed rigorous mouth cleaning before rituals or duels. After all, a clean mouth reflects inner discipline, and nobody wants to die in battle with spinach stuck between their teeth. A few samurai even wrote short poems about their dental habits. One famous tanka translates roughly to, "Before I draw blade, a sip of tea, teeth are clean. So death may arrive and find no foul breath in me. Honor lingers in the mouth." Dramatic? Absolutely. But you can't help admiring the flair. You're invited to share a simple lunch with the trainees: rice balls, pickled plum, and some surprisingly spicy radish. As the meal winds down, everyone takes out their chosen implement: twigs, salted cloth, even a few with tiny brushes made of bundled grass, and begins their post-meal routine in near silence. You follow suit, trying not to overthink the twig, currently scrubbing last night's tofu from your molars. One of the older samurai grins and leans in conspiratorially. "Want to hear a secret?" You nod. "We used to test new recruits by checking their teeth first. Anyone with obvious decay got assigned to night watch." You blink. "Why?" He shrugs. "Bad teeth, bad luck? Or maybe they just snored louder." He laughs. You laugh. It echoes under the paper eaves, warm and human. As the session wraps, you thank the instructors and bow deeply. You've learned something more than just technique. There's an elegance to how these warriors approach even the smallest of routines. A kind of quiet pride in being clean, even in the parts no one sees. You step back into the street, pockets full of pear wood twigs, and wonder, maybe you don't need fluoride to feel like a hero. Just discipline, a little vinegar, and the occasional tooth-shaped poem. The afternoon sun dips a little lower now, painting the rooftops in soft amber and turning even the city's wooden gutters into golden gutters, if such a poetic thing can be said about sewage systems. You meander through narrow back streets, feeling the warmth of your samurai-inspired dental enthusiasm fade just slightly, because now you're approaching a part of town where hygiene takes on a whole new meaning. Welcome to the pleasure quarters. No, not that kind of pleasure, though that's certainly part of the story. You've arrived in a district lined with silken curtains, paper lanterns, and the haunting strains of a shamisen being plucked behind closed doors. This is where fashion, status, and cosmetic rituals reach their peak, and that includes some of the most elaborate tooth treatments in Edo. You're here to see a courtesan, but strictly for research, of course. You're ushered into a refined tea salon by a graceful attendant who eyes your slightly smudged ohaguro with a smirk that reads both approval and pity. You're not quite nailing the look. Moments later, she appears. A high-ranking oiran, a courtesan so elevated she makes modern. Celebrities seem like street magicians. Her hair is a sculpture of lacquer and hairpins. Her kimono likely costs more than your house, and when she smiles, it's there, a perfect shimmering black grin. But hers isn't just iron water dabbed on before dinner. No, her ohaguro is a masterpiece, maintained by a personal assistant who spends an hour each day layering, polishing, sealing. Clean teeth, she says, are only beautiful when they know their place. You think it sounds profound. You nod as if you understand. You don't, but you pretend. She offers you tea, and with it a tiny silver dish of clove-infused honey for the teeth. To sweeten the breath, she explains, without sugar's betrayal. It's floral, numbing, and oddly addictive. You Try not to grimace as your already iron-soaked mouth now tastes like someone dunked a cinnamon stick in old coins. Historians still debate whether courtesans genuinely liked ohaguro, or if it was a status trap they had no real choice in. Some claimed it helped them look older, wiser, untouchable. Others whispered it was a protective mask, beauty made intimidating. But there was more than aesthetics at play. Courtesans were among the first to experiment with what you might call oral perfumes. Tiny sachets of mint, chrysanthemum petals, dried yuzu peel tucked into the cheek during performances. Breath mattered, smell mattered. If your mouth offended, you lost clients. One story tells of a rival, Oiran, who mixed crushed pearl into her tooth powder to outshine her competition, literally. She reportedly died with the cleanest, most radioactive smile in all of Edo. Did it happen? Hard to say. But you can't stop picturing a glowing skeleton with impeccable bite alignment. The Oiran gently taps your cheek with her fan and gestures for you to try one of her toothpaste brushes. You do, dipping it into a thick, smoky black ink that smells faintly of myrrh and fermented tea. You paint, slowly, carefully, like applying eyeliner to your mouth. When you smile again, she nods. "Better," she says, "but you still look like a monk who sinned." Fair enough. You sip more tea, now bitter with clove and compliments. And as you listen to her talk of herbalists, apothecaries, and the occasional dentist poet, you realize that for courtesans, dental care wasn't about health. It was about power, impression, mastery of illusion. The room grows dimmer. Lamps are lit. The shamisen continues its delicate weeping. You bow your thanks, tuck a sample sachet of minty, herbs into your sleeve, and leave the tea house feeling a little glamorous, a little buzzed, and very, very aware of your own breath. Evening settles over Edo with the gentle sigh of cooling rooftops and the soft crackle of charcoal braziers coming back to life. You pass clusters of townsfolk wrapping up their day, merchants haggling over the last turnips, kids darting between lanterns, a few elderly ladies comparing notes on the neighborhood cats. And among them, a familiar sight catches your eye. A line of people waiting at the steps of a temple. But it's not for worship. It's for a checkup. No, not the kind with clipboards and sterile gloves. This is the Edo version of wellness outreach. A traveling monk known for his holistic care methods has returned, and word spreads fast when someone arrives who can bless your spirit and clean your molars. You decide to join the queue. The temple courtyard is dimly lit with oil lamps, casting long shadows and a flickering kind of holiness over everything. As the line shuffles forward, you notice each person emerging from the monk's care looks lighter, less tense. Some hold tiny scrolls. Others carry small herbal packets. And one proudly shows off a new toothpick, engraved with a tiny lotus. When your turn comes, the monk, a kind-faced man with surprisingly white teeth, bows and beckons you forward. He doesn't speak much. Instead, he gestures for you to sit on a low stool while he examines your mouth with a polished silver mirror and a tool that looks suspiciously like a hairpin. He mutters thoughtfully, nods, then offers you a rinse. Lukewarm water laced with persimmon leaf, fennel root, and something vaguely resembling mint. It's bitter at first, but then sweetens. You feel the inside of your cheeks go slightly numb, not in a scary way. In a maybe this could be a spa treatment kind of way. He then hands you a cloth-wrapped bundle, a mix of dried roots, crushed shell, and dried green tea leaves. Boil, he says. Rinse nightly. You nod solemnly, as if this is a sacred trust. And in a way, it is. Historians still puzzle over how much oral hygiene was religious versus pragmatic. In many temples, dental care was simply part of daily routine. After all, monks chanted for hours. Bad breath would ruin the harmony. Plus, clear breath was believed to be spiritually purifying. To speak prayers from a foul mouth was considered in some texts a kind of disrespect. You take a moment to observe. The courtyard. A young monk teaches a child to rinse silently. Another records names in a ledger, perhaps a proto-dental registry. The entire setup feels oddly advanced for a society without electric lights or mass-produced floss. You remember a story told by one of the temple elders, a traveling monk who once cured a woman's chronic headaches with nothing more than a thorough saltwater rinse and a meditation chant on the vowels of the Japanese alphabet. A-I-U-E-O, he said, were the original vibrations of the universe and of clean breath. You thank the monk, bow deeply, and tuck the herb bundle into your sash. Your mouth tastes slightly herbal, slightly metallic, and entirely refreshed, as You walk back toward the city's glowing center, you realize that in Edo, even something as mundane as dental care becomes ritual, not rushed, not outsourced, but deliberate, repetitive, gentle, almost sacred. And really, isn't that what we all crave at the end of the day? A little ceremony, a little care, something that reminds you, even in a city without mouthwash, someone is always tending to their smile. Back in the bustle of the city, lanterns sway in the evening breeze like sleepy fireflies tethered to the eaves. The air hums with a different rhythm now, shops shuttering, gossip slowing, the rustle of people returning home. But you're not done. Not yet. Your curiosity drags you down a quieter lane where a small crowd has gathered around a storyteller. He's animated, gray-haired, and speaking with his whole body. And that's when the samurai said, "Even my horse smells. Better than your breath." The crowd bursts into laughter, wheezing gently like bellows. But it's that last line that sticks in your head. Because bad breath, koshu, wasn't just unpleasant in Edo, it was insulting. You lean against a post, listening as the storyteller moves on to tales of love lost to poor oral upkeep, and warriors passed over for promotions because their halitosis offended the general's cat. Exaggerations? Sure. But there's a grain of truth in every joke. And tonight, you're about to learn how deeply personal and political bad breath could be. You follow a quiet trail through the district, toward a small archive house where a calligraphy student is copying satirical poems. She lets you peek at one. His words stink like boiled radish left too long. Let his breath be banished, his speeches gone wrong. Turns out, poets often weaponized smell, especially bad breath, as metaphor, a way to shame, critique, or undermine. One poem mockingly called a corrupt official the ginger-toothed dragon, accusing him of eating too much and speaking too foul. Historians still argue whether such jabs were effective or just creative venting, but scrolls don't lie. Breath was reputational currency. A foul mouth could sink alliances, ruin courtship, even cost you a promotion. And in certain diplomatic meetings, there were actual breath check assistants, quiet attendants with a discerning nose and a polite way of handing over fresh herbs. You stumble upon a modest tea house known for serving the politest tea in Edo. The owner, an elderly man with a voice like worn silk, insists on guests rinsing with herbal tea before conversation begins. "It's not for you," he says, pouring steaming barley water. "It's for everyone else." You sip. It's toasty, earthy, and slightly bitter. He nods approvingly. He tells you of his younger days, when he once courted a girl with clove-rubbed teeth and a lavender-stuffed handkerchief. "She smelled like a blessing," he says wistfully. "Then I met her brother. Smelled like fermented tofu. Courtship ended quickly." The tale draws a slow laugh from the room. It wasn't uncommon for lovers to exchange breath-freshening gifts. Tiny boxes of powdered herbs, lacquered toothpicks, or even scented mouthcloths embroidered with poetry. You once heard of a man who wooed a woman by slipping a mint leaf into her shoe. Romantic or weird? You're still unsure. In contrast, having breath that could wilt bamboo was nearly a moral failing. It suggested sloth, decay, lack of discipline, and in a society obsessed with harmony, even the breath had to play its part. As you wander homeward, your mouth flavored with lingering barley tea and storybook satire, you begin to understand. In Edo, the mouth wasn't just an eating tool, it was a message board, a mood ring, a weapon and a whisper. Your grin might be ink black and a little sore, but it is also, strangely, respected. A sign that you care, that you've entered into. The quiet pact of shared space and gentle breath. And maybe, just maybe, that storyteller's samurai wasn't entirely wrong. You're almost home now. The city's nighttime version is softer, more whisper than shout. Behind sliding doors, families settle down with rice and miso, children recite poems half asleep, and cats stalk shadows like they own the place. You feel the ache of your cheeks from smiling politely all day, a side effect you're learning of managing your mouth in Edo. But tonight, before bed, you're making one last stop. You've heard rumors of an old kampo shop tucked away near the lotus pond. Kampo, Japan's traditional herbal medicine system, is like a quiet cousin to tooth care, more focused on balance than polish, but no less dedicated to bodily harmony, molars included. You find it just before the paper lanterns are snuffed, out for the night. The shop is barely more than a counter and 1,000 drawers, each holding ingredients with names like cloud root, wind moss, and bear gallbladder, ethically sourced. Behind it stands a wrinkled man who looks like he's been brewing things since the Heian period. "Gums sore?" he asks, not even looking up. You nod hesitantly. Slightly iron-fatigued, he grunts with sympathy and starts scooping powders and bits of dried plant into a paper envelope. For rinsing, steep like tea, smells terrible, works better than prayer. Inside is a blend of shiso, hozuki, Japanese lantern plant, a touch of cinnamon bark, and, yes, a few shaved deer, antler flakes. You can practically feel your mouth becoming more historical just by holding the packet. He also hands you a wax-sealed bottle. Clove vinegar, mouth rinse, use sparingly, or you'll see ancestors you're not ready for. You nod solemnly. That's noted. Historians still argue whether kampo mouth rinses were truly effective or just spiritual snake oil, but many Edo citizens swore by them, especially the bitter ones. If it tastes awful, they said, your teeth will thank you. There's even record of a traveling monk who once cured a lord's entire household of tooth rot using nothing but kampo powders and extreme optimism. Whether it worked or not, the Lord doubled his donations to the temple and hosted a banquet in honor of clean molars. You take your bundle home, steep the rinse over your brazier, and let the smell curl into your nose. Earthy, sharp, vaguely, reminiscent of a haunted spice cabinet. You swish, gag slightly, and feel renewed, or maybe just humbled. There's something soothing in the ritual, though. In the idea that care doesn't have to taste good, that cleansing can come with a grimace, that healing sometimes smells like old socks and victory. As you hang the herbal, pack it near your pillow to dry, you think about the quiet pride Edo citizens had in their mouths. Not just the samurai and courtesans, but the monks, the merchants, the children with their clove balls and river sand. Each one doing what they didaji could to keep decay at bay, tooth by tooth, day by day, and now you're one of them, or at least your breath is. The brazier's soft glow casts long shadows across your tatami floor, and the herbal rinse still lingers faintly on your tongue like a distant memory of chewing incense. You settle onto your futon, ready to drift into sleep, but your neighbor chooses that moment to show up with a pear and a troubling story about molars. Apparently, her cousin lost a front tooth last week. Just gone. Bit into a rice cracker and out it came like a tiny ghost of negligence. The tragedy? She wasn't even 30. Now she's worried her marriage prospects will fall faster than her dental fortitude. And in Edo, that's not just vanity, it's reality. A missing tooth is more than a minor inconvenience here. It's a signal, a reputation hazard. For women especially, a full set of teeth was tied to beauty, health, and even fertility myths. One old saying claims, if her teeth fall early, so too will her loyalty, which seems wildly unfair, but, patriarchy. You learn quickly that smiles were currency, and decay could bankrupt you socially. Matchmakers were known to ask discreet questions about dental status, and not-so-discreet relatives might peer into your mouth like it's a divination bowl before agreeing to a union. Historians still argue whether this obsession with teeth in courtship was based on genuine health concerns or just deeply internalized cosmetic standards. Likely both. Edo didn't have orthodontists, but it had plenty of judgment. You recall hearing about a bride who wore a porcelain tooth cap for her wedding portrait, an early, charmingly janky form of dental cosplay. The story goes that her groom was so smitten, he never noticed her real front tooth was missing until their third child was born. On the flip side, a toothy disaster could delay betrothal for years. In some cases, women sought early ohaguro to mask damaged teeth, both to preserve their image and preempt judgment. The lacquer didn't just look elegant, it also covered cracks and cavities in an inky veil of mystery. You ask your neighbor, what happened to her cousin? She's seeing a matchmaker next week, she says, munching the last of the pair. But she's practicing smiling with her lips shut. Modesty. You nod. Closed-mouth grins are a form of self-defense here, and honestly, kind of chic. There's a whisper of fear in the way your neighbor talks about it. Not terror exactly, but that quiet, communal dread that comes from knowing your fate might hinge on something as small as an incisor. You sip water, trying not to think about your own slightly sore gum from this morning's over-enthusiastic twig brushing, and that's when she says it. You know they used to use molars to predict your luck? You blink. How? If your wisdom teeth came in straight, she says, you'd be wise. If they came in sideways, you'd be stubborn. If they never came in, you were cursed. You both pause, instinctively poking your tongues toward the backs of your jaws. Teeth, it seems, aren't just tools. They're omens. You lie back, gazing at the wood-beam ceiling, thinking about all the expectations resting on your humble dental arch. And as sleep threatens to pull you under, one thought floats gently above it all. You'd better hold on to every tooth you've got. The next morning, you're awoken not by the sun, or the rooster, or even the polite argument outside about who borrowed whose sandals, but by a knock. A firm, deliberate knock, accompanied by the voice of your aunt. Matchmaker's coming today. Get up, scrub your face, and your teeth, thoroughly. You sit up, bleary-eyed and confused. You're not getting married, are you? No, but your cousin is. And you've been roped into helping with one of the strangest and most awkward courtship rituals in Edo, Japan, the premarital tooth inspection. Yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. You shuffle to the courtyard, still rubbing sleep from your eyes, where your cousin sits nervously in her best kimono. She's already painted her lips and dabbed her teeth with the ohaguro brush. Her breath smells like vinegar, cloves, and anxiety. The matchmaker arrives, an older woman with a knowing gaze, layers of brocade, and a portable mirror tucked into her sleeve like a dagger of truth. She bows, exchanges pleasantries, and then, without warning, produces a tiny candle, lights it, and crouches in front of your cousin's face. The inspection begins. It's not just about breath. It's about structure, color, presence. A mouth check was as essential as a resume, possibly more so. After all, teeth don't lie. You can rehearse a good personality, but you can't fake molars. You hover awkwardly, pretending to rearrange teacups while the matchmaker asks your cousin to open wider. She uses a tiny flat spoon to gently lift her lips, peering in with the same reverence some people reserve for moon phases. Historians still argue whether these dental exams were truly diagnostic or mostly symbolic. Likely both. A full mouth of clean, darkened teeth showed discipline, self-care, and, let's be honest, decent genes. A crooked yellowed set might suggest poverty, laziness, or too much candied sweet potato. The inspection ends with a nod. Your cousin exhales like she's just finished a duel. The matchmaker slips the mirror back into her sleeve and sips tea. No words exchanged, but the approval hangs in the air like fresh-cut hinoki. Later, your aunt corners you with a look. You should be practicing too. Smile like you've got secrets, and floss with something better than rice husks. You nod solemnly, unsure if you're being teased or warned. As the house settles into post-matchmaking gossip mode, you think about how much cultural weight was packed into the mouth. A place of nourishment, beauty, words, and now, eligibility. It makes sense in a way. In a world with no x-rays or lab reports, what better measure of vitality than the visible bones that still live in your face? That night, you catch your cousin in the mirror, perfecting her closed-mouth smile. You join her, blackened teeth reflecting, softly in the flickering candlelight, both of you suppressing laughter, because nothing says romantic readiness like passing a dental inspection by candlelight. Days pass, and the scent of spring begins to flirt with the city. Plum blossoms open lazily, the rivers run a little clearer, and the air feels less like winter breath and more like a slow exhale. You're back in the market district, chewing on a clove pod like it's a rare candy when something shiny catches your eye. It's a vendor, hawking curiosities from the continent. Silk fans, medicinal powders, and, strangely, rows of strange little sticks with bristles tied to one end. You stop in your tracks. Toothbrushes. Well, proto-toothbrushes. Chinese imports, bundled in neat rolls of bamboo and boar hair, with tiny inked instructions that may or may not suggest using them on teeth. Or for calligraphy. It's hard to tell. The vendor catches your interest and beckons. From the Ming court, he says, obviously exaggerating. Used by emperors. Cleans even shame. You pick one up. It's light, surprisingly soft, a little bendy. You turn it over in your fingers, wondering what Edo society would make of this curious hybrid between a twig and a tiny broom. Some scholars believe these brushes were inspired by earlier Indian and Arabic designs, passed through the silk, roads, and finally reaching Japan via trade routes. Others argue it was pure domestic innovation, sparked by people tired of chewing bark at breakfast. You buy one, why not? And as you walk through the alley, testing it out with a bit of powdered coral, you can't help but marvel. It works. In a delicate, barely there way. Like cleaning your teeth with a whisper. But here's the thing. These brushes are expensive, imported, not easily replaced. For most people in Edo, it's a novelty, not a necessity. You pass a group of children, giggling at your odd bristled contraption. One dares another to sniff it. You tuck it away. Elite courtiers, wealthy merchants, and curious monks might adopt this trend. But the average fish seller or rice farmer, they're sticking to twigs, thank you very much. Historians still argue whether the toothbrush ever truly caught on in Edo, or whether it remained a fringe habit for rich eccentrics. Evidence is thin, mostly poetry, a few trade logs, and one legendary drawing of a geisha brushing her teeth while riding a palanquin. Interpret that how you will. You. Duck into a friend's house for dinner, grilled fish, pickled plum, and miso soup that tastes like rain-soaked wood, in a good way. Afterward, everyone reaches for their usual tools. Twigs, rinses, powders. You casually pull out your new bristled brush. Silence falls. Your friend leans over. "What is that?" You explain, brushing slowly, ceremonially. They watch with wide eyes, half impressed, half worried you've joined a secret cult. One aunt finally breaks the tension. "Fancy," she says. But can it clean fish bones from your back teeth? She smiles, twig already in hand. You smile back. Maybe not, but it sure feels elegant. Later that night, as you hang your new brush to dry, you realize this little object is more than a novelty. It's a glimpse into the future, a sign that slowly even Edo changes, adapts, brushes forward, but you still keep your twigs, just in case. Morning returns, as it always does, with the soft creak of wood and the murmuring rhythm of an entire neighborhood stretching its joints. You step outside, toothbrush tucked in your sleeve like a secret talisman, only to be immediately drawn into a commotion near the poetry hall. A small crowd has gathered not for a recital, but for a reading of Kyoka poems, the satirical cousins of the more stoic tanka. These short, cheeky verses mock politics, love, aging. And today someone's breath, a grinning scribe holds up a scroll and reads aloud. He opens his mouth to speak of spring. Plum blossoms wilt from shame. The crowd roars with laughter, and you catch a glimpse of the poem's target, a minor official who's pretending not to be present. His mouth is clamped shut like a miser's coin pouch. You find yourself amused and a little horrified. Because in Edo, bad breath isn't just a private embarrassment, it's a public punchline. Breath was metaphor, language, social weapon. Poets, especially those too broke or too bold to complain directly to authority, would couch their grievances in metaphorical stink. A corrupt tax collector might be labeled mouth of salted eel. A boastful merchant could be shamed with verses about the steam of spoiled radish. Historians still debate whether these barbs actually changed behavior or simply let people vent. Either way, you now realize that oral hygiene isn't just for you, it's for your reputation. The scroll reading continues. Another verse. His words curl leaves before autumn comes. The wind of onions, strong and cruel. You wince. That one's about the tea-house philosopher who never rinses after pickled daikon. Harsh, but fair. Of course, the more political poems use clever euphemisms. One particularly daring poet wrote, "O high lord's breath, like ancient armor, never aired, we beg for wind." The poet allegedly disappeared for a year after that, came back with cleaner teeth and no explanation. In quieter circles, women wielded breath critiques more subtly. Court diaries include records of whispered notes passed during banquets, some scented with mint and folded to reveal phrases like, "Too close to summer in your words." Translation, "Brush, sir, please." You visit a small print shop that sells pamphlets of humorous verses. One entire collection, The Stinking Scrolls, is devoted to mouth-themed insults. One line reads, "Even foxes flee the mouth of Lord Gasayama." A footnote claims Lord Gasayama laughed when he read it, then outlawed garlic at court dinners. You can't help wondering what Edo's poets would do with modern dental commercials or podcast ads. Probably write a sonnet mocking fluoride, but despite the mockery, there's something communal here. No one's being cruel to the poor or toothless. The jabs are saved for those with power, pride, and pungent declarations. It's not about the smell, it's about what the smell represents. You take out your bristled brush, suddenly self-conscious. You give your mouth a gentle once-over, not because you expect applause, but because, here, your breath is part of your voice, your presence, your poetic vulnerability. And in a world where words float like lanterns on a pond, best not to be the one who smells like pond scum. By now, you've gotten used to the weight of things in Edo, the gentle burden of carrying herbs in your sleeve, the way your tongue adapts to daily rinses, and the surprisingly heavy presence of molars when you start thinking about them too much. But there's one more curious thing you've heard whispers about, and today you're going to find out if it's real. Tooth amulets. You follow a crooked path past a row of street performers, one juggling fans, another reciting ghost stories. in perfect falsetto, and arrive at a tiny shrine nestled under a ginkgo tree. Hanging from its eaves are strings of odd charms, miniature teeth carved from wood, bone, and even folded paper. The priest greets you with a nod and a grin that shows 3 gold-capped teeth. "Looking for love?" he asks. You blink. "I thought these were for dental luck." He chuckles. "Same thing, some say. Here, teeth aren't just health markers, they're symbols of love, of longevity, of staying power. A molar that endures is a love that won't flake. A straight incisor? Future children, tidy and obedient." He shows you a box of offerings left by visitors. Real teeth, baby ones mostly, wrapped in silk cloth. "People pray with them," he explains. "Ask for strong families, clean starts, or forgiveness from cavities past." You find that oddly moving. Some charms are worn as necklaces, tiny wooden molars inscribed with protective sutras. Others are tucked into wallets, hung from bedroom doors, or even tied to babies' ankles to ward off teething misfortunes. Historians still argue whether these practices had deep spiritual roots or were just convenient ways of dealing with lost teeth and superstition. Regardless, they persisted for generations. Even some samurai carried lucky tooth carvings into battle, believing they would return home with every piece of themselves intact. You purchase a small amulet, a smooth black charm carved from persimmon wood. The priest whispers a short blessing over it and ties it onto your sash with red string. He leans in. If it falls off, someone nearby is lying. You glance around quickly, just in case. Outside the shrine, a group of children pass by chanting something in rhythm, tossing tiny stones into a bucket. You recognize the melody. It's the tooth spirit song, a nursery rhyme used to comfort kids when they lose a tooth. Throw it up for strong roots. Throw it down for wisdom. You ask the priest about it. He nods. If the tooth came from the bottom jaw, you throw it onto the roof. If from the top, you bury it under the floorboards. Either way, the spirits know what to do. Tooth folklore is layered here. Old grannies will warn you never to speak ill of a lost tooth, lest it return in a dream and bite your conscience. Lovers sometimes exchange polished baby teeth as tokens of trust. One couple in a nearby village was buried holding each other's molars. Gross, some said. Romantic, others insisted. You finger the amulet on your sash as you walk. Back into the marketplace, feeling strangely protected. It doesn't buzz, it doesn't glow, but it carries something. The weight of all these little stories, of breath, love, decay, and dreams woven together into one oddly sturdy symbol. And that's Edo for you, where even your old teeth get a second life, as jewelry, prayers, or ghost-proof charms. You've now rinsed with rice water, brushed with twigs, had your teeth blackened and blessed, and even acquired a molar amulet. Naturally, the next step in your oral odyssey brings you face to face with one of Edo's least glamorous professions. The street tooth puller. You hear him before you see him. A rhythmic clinking of metal tools like someone trying to serenade a pot. Rounding a corner near the fish market, you find his stall, a small wooden bench, a folding screen painted with questionable diagrams of gums, and a faded sign reading, "Quick relief, no screaming, optional." He's a wiry man with a beard, like burnt straw and hands stained with the ghosts of thousands of extractions. He grins at you, revealing a mouthful of surprising dental perfection. "You've got a look," he says, like someone with an ache waiting to happen. You assure him your teeth are fine, for now. Still, curiosity glues your feet to the ground. And so begins your crash course in Edo dentistry. These tooth pullers weren't exactly licensed. They operated on the edges of legitimacy, part barber, part herbalist, part enthusiastic gambler. Their tools were simple: pliers, tongs, sharpened chopsticks, cloths to muffle screams. Some had assistants. Most just had patience and strong stomachs. You sit on the edge of his bench pretending to be a prospective client. He shows you his tool kit, a small case of iron hooks, a powder he calls pain fog, and a curved spoon for scooping out the truly unfortunate. "This one," he says, holding up a tiny chisel. "Wedding present. You try not to run." Historians still argue whether Edo tooth pullers were helpful healers or tolerated nuisances. Some became local legends for their gentle hands. Others were nicknamed the Gum Lords and featured in folk songs sung with grim affection. This man, though, seems competent, if terrifying. He tells you he learned the trade from a Buddhist monk who pulled teeth as a form of karma cleansing. To remove pain, the monk would say, you must sometimes remove the root of the story. You ask about anesthesia. He holds up a flask of fermented plum liquor. "Enough of this. You'll forget you had teeth." Makes sense. You notice a small jar of soot-black powder on his table. "For post-extraction packing," he explains. "Clove, bamboo ash, licorice bark. Keeps the mouth from screaming again." There's a waiting patient now, an older man, clutching his jaw. He nods at you, murmurs something about pickled turnips, and settles in. You take your cue to step back. The process is shockingly fast. A flash of metal, a wince, a muffled yell. Then, a tooth, glistening and angry, held up like a trophy. "Still warm," the puller notes, placing it in a bowl of sake. For good measure, the patient is handed a cloth soaked in cold tea and told to avoid solid food, sour poems, and gossip for 2 days. You leave the stall in awe and slight horror, clutching your own teeth a little tighter. It's not just the crude tools or lack of gloves. It's the casual intimacy of it, the way dental pain was handled out in the open, like mending a shoe or fixing a screen. Back home, you inspect your reflection. You smile, carefully, each tooth still in place. For now, and yet. There's something comforting about knowing where to go if things turn sour. In Edo, everything, even agony, has its place. You spend the next morning in quieter corners of Edo, winding your way through alleys perfumed with miso steam and drying herbs. You're not looking for a vendor or a shrine today. You're following the sound of a song. High, soft voices, off-key in that charming way only children can manage, drift from a courtyard school tucked behind a shrine. You peek inside. A group of children is sitting in a rough circle, each with a little cloth pouch in hand. The teacher, a patient woman with a face carved in perpetual smile lines, is handing out tiny rewards, dried plums, polished stones, and sprigs of mint. And today's lesson? Tooth customs. The children are singing a rhyme you heard just the other day. If it falls from below, throw it above. To the roof, to the sky, for strength and love. It's the Edo version of the tooth fairy, minus the wings and gold coins. Here, teeth aren't traded for cash, but launched skyward or buried with intent, depending on their origin. The custom is simple. A baby tooth from the lower jaw is thrown onto the roof while an upper one is buried under the floor or thrown beneath the house. The logic? Encourage the incoming adult teeth to grow straight, following the direction of their lost siblings. You sit beside a boy who just lost his first molar. He's cradling it like treasure. "I'll throw it really hard," he whispers, "so the new one grows strong." He narrows his eyes. "Like a samurai." Historians still argue where the tradition came from. Some trace it to Chinese folk practices. Others believe it emerged locally, tied to agricultural planting beliefs. Either way, it's lasted centuries, morphing slightly but never disappearing. Thor. Teacher hands out small scrolls with tooth-shaped stamps, certificates of bravery. You help a little girl tie hers to her satchel. She grins wide, still missing half her front row, and you realize there's no shame here. Tooth loss isn't failure. It's celebrated, mythologized, sung about. Some parents even hang their child's first tooth in the rafters, believing it will bless the house with protection from sickness or fire, Others wear it in tiny pouches sewn inside the child's obi, until the next tooth is ready to make its journey. You share your own tooth tale, your pretend one at least. The class gasps at the idea of clove rinse and vinegar as part of a nighttime ritual. One boy raises his hand, solemn-faced. "Do you think teeth dream of coming back?" You blink. Maybe they do. He nods, satisfied. And just like that, you've been folded into the secret society of small mouths and big imaginations. As the children line up to go home, their songs echo behind you. You watch a few toss imaginary teeth into the sky, aiming for the gods or the moon or a passing hawk. You clutch your own not-yet-lost molars with a little more appreciation. In Edo, even the smallest goodbye, a baby tooth falling away, is given a ceremony, a rhyme, a dream of return. As twilight creeps back into the city and the street lamps begin their soft, flickering dance, you make your way toward the theater district. Not for a play, but for a breath of fresh air, or rather a lesson in faking fresh air. Because tonight, you're meeting a friend of your aunt's, a semi-retired court lady who's made an entire second career out of advising Edo's social elite on discreet freshness. Her secret? Props. Her home is like a perfumery and prop closet merged into one. Fans, sachets, fabric pouches, and boxes of dried herbs are tucked into every corner. She greets you with a smile, not a blackened one, but closed-lipped and mysterious, and waves you in with a folded fan. Sometimes, she says, you don't need to clean the mouth, you just need to distract the nose. She fans herself dramatically. The breeze is light, but laced with a smell you can't quite place. Mint? Dried plum? Sandalwood? Turns out these fans aren't just for flair. They're brushed lightly with scented oils, sometimes powdered with ground mint or citrus rind, and deployed strategically. A slight flick to the face mid-conversation, a slow waft near one's mouth after laughter. A theatrical yawn into a perfumed sleeve. She shows you a few techniques. Fan over the nose while listening, fan sideways while speaking, hold just under the chin while pretending to think. Each gesture both elegant and functional. Breath management with flair. Historians still debate how widespread this practice was, especially outside the upper classes. But among court women, entertainers, and even certain diplomats, the scented fan was less about show and more about self-preservation. If you couldn't guarantee your breath was pleasant, you could at least control the narrative. She hands you a small pouch. Inside are dried shiso leaves, crushed chrysanthemum petals, and a few shavings of koboku, a fragrant wood. Chew. A pinch, she advises. Don't swallow unless you enjoy tasting ancient perfume for 3 hours. You oblige cautiously. The mix is floral and minty, with a faint peppery kick. You immediately understand why some preferred props to chewing. Many Edo citizens used similar herbal tricks, carrying mint leaves in sleeves, tucking citrus rinds into handkerchiefs, even sucking on dried plum pits when conversation loomed. One actor famously kept a pouch of clove bark in his wig, and whenever his scene involved shouting, he'd rub it on his tongue mid-performance. The audience thought it was a character choice. You try the fan technique in her mirror, giving yourself a smirk and a slow waft. You look half mysterious, half fainting courtesan. Not bad. She approves. Very good, she says. Now try it while asking for a favor, or while pretending you didn't hear gossip correctly. You practice. She critiques. Somewhere along the way, you realize this is part theater, part hygiene, part defense strategy, and it makes sense. Edo was crowded. Conversations were close. Indoor air was a blend of incense, fish, and humidity. If your mouth was a problem, it was everyone's problem, so people adapted. Before you leave, she hands you a small fan painted with cranes. A gift, she says, for moments when your breath is fine, but your company is questionable. You thank her, bowing low. Back in the night air, you flick open your new fan and let its scent drift around you. You smile, a real one this time, and Feel a little taller. You're not just a mouth anymore. You're a mood. You stroll through the quiet back lanes of Edo now, fan folded discreetly in your sleeve, herb sachet tucked beneath your collar, and breath fresh enough to charm a shrine maiden. The sky is velvet blue, stars peeking like shy onlookers between the tiled rooftops, and a gentle hush blankets the city. You pass by a group of friends sitting on the steps of a tea house, telling jokes and laughing into their sleeves. One of them lets out a sudden guffaw, revealing an enthusiastic lack of molars. No one flinches, no one jokes. The laughter rolls on, warm and effortless, and that's when it hits you. No one's showing their teeth. Sure, people open their mouths to speak, to laugh, to eat pickled turnips and gossip about fishmongers, but there are no wide, toothy grins. No baring of enamel. No cheeky flashes of dentals like you'd find in portraits a few centuries later. And it's not an accident. In Edo, modesty reigns, not just in clothing and tone, but in expression. Smiling with teeth? It's considered. Brash, even a little rude. A sign of over-eagerness, of Western theatrics. Reserved people, proper people. Smile softly, lips closed, emotions cupped like tea. You recall earlier moments from your week, the woman with the blackened teeth who smiled like a secret, the samurai who chewed his pear-twig brush with the seriousness of a scroll reading, the children chanting about skybound molars, none of them showing the gap with pride. Historians still argue whether this aversion to toothy smiles was purely aesthetic, or tied to Buddhist ideals of humility. Or maybe it was practical. Less risk of showing a crooked row or a telltale black spot when keeping your lips neatly together. You see it in art, too. Woodblock prints show mouths like gentle commas, always suggesting more than they show. In theater, a villain might flash teeth to emphasize his vulgarity. A hero? He emotes through the eyes, the stance, the voice, not the mouth. Even the act of covering the mouth when laughing, a delicate flutter of fingers or a fan, comes from this practice of modesty. Not to hide shame, but to preserve grace. And then there's ohaguro. Blackened teeth weren't just a beauty ritual, they were meant to be concealed. A flash of them was intentional, intimate, like a glimpse beneath a kimono collar. You pause outside a lantern shop and catch your reflection in the polished glass. Blackened teeth, faint smile, fan at the ready. You've changed, not just in routine or appearance, but in how you think about your mouth. Once a noisy, utilitarian hole, now a place of reverence, subtlety, and quiet social maneuvering. You watch two lovers pass, whispering. They smile at each other, lips pressed in close, eyes warm, teeth unshone. Their joy isn't less because it's hidden. If anything, it's more potent for its restraint. You try it. A closed-mouth smile, a nod, a fan to your cheek. And suddenly, you feel more Edo than ever. You return home through the sleepy lattice of Edo's winding lanes, feet padding on stone, breath cool against your tongue. The city is quiet now, save for the occasional bark, a distant shamisen, and the gentle creak of bamboo blinds swaying with the night wind. Inside, your home welcomes you with the faint scent of old wood and dried herbs. You move with practiced ease, pouring a cup of barley tea, lighting a small oil lamp, and setting out your nightly dental tools. A twig, your bristled brush, the compo rinse, and of course, the tiny amulet still dangling loyally from your sash. Tonight, like every night, you begin the ritual. You chew the twig just enough to soften it, its familiar bitterness grounding you after a long day. Then you gently massage your teeth, moving in slow circles as if brushing away more than food. Maybe brushing away the day's clutter, too. The noise, the stares, the lingering smell of pickled mackerel, then the rinse, You warm it slightly as advised, letting the herbs bloom. The smell is bold, bark-like, with notes of scorched fennel and an after hint of something that might be citrus, or an old drawer. Either way, you swish it dutifully, eyes closed, picturing monks and courtesans and tiny tooth-throwing children. You dry your mouth with a cloth embroidered by your grandmother, the one who said your teeth were well-behaved for someone who talks so much. You smile just a little, no teeth. The amulet goes on the hook by your bed. Your toothbrush, yes, the fancy imported one, is rinsed and wrapped. Your fan, still faintly minty, is folded and set beside your pillow. You lie back on your futon, bones sighing into the mat, the air around you cooling like a bowl of forgotten tea. And you think about everything you've learned, how oral hygiene in Edo wasn't just about staying clean, but about participating. In rituals, in respect, in beauty, in the odd, slow poetry of daily life, your mouth feels fresh, yes, but more than that, it feels honored, tended, known. And as your eyelids begin to drift downward, you imagine all the other mouths in this city, chewing, rinsing, fanning, smiling in secret, each one carrying a quiet story, a charm, a breath. Wind down, 300 words. The lamp burns low, flickering just enough to show the outline of your cup, your fan, your tiny bag of dried mint and citrus. The night air slips gently through the day shutters, soft and cool, like fingers brushing the surface of still water. Every sound outside fades to a hush. No wheels, no shoes, just the occasional breath of breeze, rising and falling like an old lullaby. Your body feels heavier now, the warmth of the blanket holding you just right. Even your jaw has relaxed, slack in the most polite, Edo-approved way. Your tongue rests against clean teeth. Your breath flows easy and light. You let yourself float backward through the day, past the tooth charms and clove sachets, past the fans and the poems and the slightly terrifying tooth puller. You remember the children singing their rooftop rhymes. You remember the monk's gentle hands and the oiron's glimmering grin. And in that slow, soft spiral of memory, your mind begins to let go. No more vinegar. No more ash. Just stillness. Your breath is yours now. Quiet, safe, ancient in its rhythm. You are part of the city, of the customs, of the story. And somewhere, in a tiny lacquered drawer, your toothbrush waits for tomorrow. Good night, gentle soul.